Hey everybody, I've got this Galaxy Book4 Edge here again. There's been a lot of conversation already about how these things interact differently than the typical laptops when it comes to different power modes versus power plans versus also the power settings in, for instance, the Samsung app. I'll show you here what we currently have. If we go down to battery and performance, we are on optimized, which says get the best of performance, heat, and fan noise. There's also high performance, which supposedly makes it get hotter and the fan can be louder. So obviously this is like most OEM high performance plans. It's in such like programs as Dell Power Manager or Dell Optimizer or Lenovo. I believe it's in Lenovo Vantage. And then also the quiet profile down here at the bottom. So you've got reduced performance and fan speed. So that would obviously lower the clock rates and also set the fans to be quieter. So I've got it on balanced and optimized right now. I'll show you the power plan as well. So, or the power mode first. So we've got the power modes here. And if you look under here, we've got balanced. There's also best power efficiency and best performance. And then finally, if you go to power plans, which is a completely different thing. There's actually a great video about this on YouTube if you're interested in more. But this is on balanced also. That's the only one that currently appears. You can make the other ones appear. They are available on all Windows computers. They have GUI IDs that you can use to invoke them. And that's for another video. And actually, I'll try to link to the guy's video if I can find it that I watched on that topic. He did a pretty good job. But we'll go ahead and run this CPU benchmark. We are unplugged, as you can tell. At the moment, I'm going to run the same one plugged in also. And I'm going to change power modes and or power plans and maybe even the settings in the Samsung app. And we're going to see if any of those things interact to make this look differently. I'm especially curious to see how things look. If there's any kind of balanced plan we can use that's maybe not balanced, maybe it is, where the performance is certainly higher when you're plugged in, which I would prefer actually, if maybe the fans run a little more and it's a little bit more powerful when you're plugged in versus when you're unplugged, where it looks more at saving battery. It would be nice if we could lock those down. So anyway, let's let this run and we'll see how things look. All right, that took about 4.5 minutes and we are now done. And here we are with our scores. These are actually quite good by the standards that I've seen. I'm not really sure why mine appears to be doing better than a lot of the other Galaxy books out there. Some of the ones with the same power settings, I think, were supposed to be producing lower performance scores, which I find very strange. But that's a really good score overall. 2700 single core is right up there with what we would expect to see. I think some of them are getting 28, 29s. And then 13,000, maybe about 1,000 shy of what we might expect to see in best case scenario. But by the way, this has not even gotten warm. It is really very cool. I'm going to let it cool down a little more though, for maybe sit for about 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll run one while it's plugged in and see how that looks next. Okay, we have let the machine cool down for a few minutes, and now we're going to run it again. This time just plugged in with the exact same power settings. And we'll come back in just a second and we will see if the results change. My prediction is it will not be much of a difference at all. We'll see if I'm right. Okay, we're just about finished here. I'll just record this one finishing. By the way, sorry this is a little off center. The reason why is I've got some windows behind me and I'm trying to minimize the reflections for you guys. So here we go, about 4.5 minutes, and let's see what the result is. And it's a little better, but not significantly. This one is almost identical, and this one I believe is about, I mean, it's not much more. It's probably 600, I think, more than the last one was, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in that neighborhood, if I remember correctly. Anyway, so that's the only thing we've changed is we've plugged in. So I'm going to leave it like this. We're going to let it cool down for a second, but I'm going to go ahead and show you what I'm going to change next. We're going to go in here, and we're going to adjust this to best performance. I'm not going to change anything yet in here. We're going to leave this the way it is, and we're going to do this separately because this is not tethered to this. It is a separate setting. And yes, I realize that the power plans are also a third setting. It's ridiculously obtuse and convoluted, but that's the way it is. We're not going to mess with the power plans today because I'm going to try to do this exactly as would be available to the user, the average user out of the box who doesn't want to mess with, GUI IDs and adding power plans and all that stuff. After all, frankly, you probably don't need the performance that's provided by screwing around with the power plans, but I mean, we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to close this back and let this sit for a couple minutes, and then we'll benchmark again. Hang tight. Oh, and before I get to that, let's check the heat. A little bit warm, but not really. I mean, where your legs would rest, which would be here and here, it's pretty cool. I mean, it's a little bit warmer, noticeably getting into this region here. You've seen the heat maps probably before, but basically this is the stuff where the fan is covering probably. I think there's dual fans in this. I have not taken it apart. I mean, I might at some point here pretty soon on video, but this is clearly where the CPU rests, and it is certainly warmer here, but it's not that warm. It's still probably only a few degrees warmer than it is in these regions, at least to the skin, to the temperature on the surface, I mean. Anyway, so all right, we'll let this sit for a minute, and then we'll continue. Okay. Actually, before I continue, I also want to talk about fan noise. I haven't heard anything yet. I've had my ear all the way up to it, and I'm pretty sure the fans have not run. If they have, it's been extremely low RPM. So that's extremely impressive. Now, we are on, in terms of power modes, best performance. And again, in the Samsung utility, the Samsung settings utility, we are still on optimized. And again, those are separate from one another. I now have it unplugged again because we're going to run this again, sort of pseudo-scientifically, and we're going to now run the next benchmark. This is relatively cool, by the way. I kind of let this cool back down to room temperature. It's pretty cool in this room. So, okay, I will be back in a moment. Okay, I want to cut in here real quick because at about the 1.5 minute mark, the fan is finally audible, but only if you get all the way up next to it. I mean, you can't tell unless you are listening to this. Not sure if you can hear that. It's not very noisy. It is almost inaudible. So I would consider this a win to the extent that it actually feels like a fanless device, even in spite of the fact that it's actively cooled. So anyway, all right, I'll be back in a minute. Also want to cut in again and say, while there's not very much fan noise, there is a little bit of CPU coil whine, some weird chirps. Check this out. Did you hear that? Almost sounds like a cricket. Listen. Is that going to bother most people? Probably not. Honestly, this is pretty heavy duty operation here, and it's still not that loud, but it is definitely something you can hear. So I did want to cut in and tell you that. Now this is almost finished. I'm just going to let it complete. Looks like it's not going to be much quicker. I suspect the score is going to be very close to what it was on balanced, and balanced, I mean. We'll see here. Or balanced optimized, I guess it is. Might be a little bit slower. We'll see. Yeah, I mean, that actually is below the balanced optimized setting, which is incredibly strange, don't you think? We're unplugged. We'll let it cool down, and right now it's 3:59. I'll wait till about 4:05, and we'll run it with it plugged in and see how that goes. All right, 4:05 p.m. here. That's been about 5 minutes, and we're going to run one with it plugged in and the exact same power settings, which again are best performance under the Windows power mode and optimized under the Samsung settings app. We'll run it again here, and we'll see how it does, and I'll let you know when the fans kick in. Okay, the fans have actually already cut on. It's only been about 40 seconds. I don't think that's because it's already warm enough for that. The reason why I don't think that's the case, number one, is it doesn't feel any warmer to the touch surface-wise. But also, it heats up pretty quickly when you do these kinds of tests. So, I mean, even letting it sit for a few minutes typically is long enough to get a pretty close to accurate benchmark in terms of, thermals and all that stuff. Obviously, if you had it like in a, 20-degree environment and then you moved it over and did it, it would get a better score probably, but not anything really substantially better in some cases. So, anyway, the fans are running. They are, yet again, nearly inaudible. And, it's nothing more than it was before. Can you hear it? Don't know if you can. They are so quiet. I wouldn't blame you if you couldn't. No coil whine, but I'm sure that'll kick in also. It's really not a major problem, so don't get all bent out of shape about that. Okay, the fans have gone up in speed actually a little bit to the extent that I can hear them slightly better. Still, really hardly at all when I'm at a normal distance from the computer. If I'm sitting typing on it, I'm not sure if I would ever have heard these fans. But maybe you can hear them. It's a little bit louder than it was previously. I'm not measuring these things professionally. Yes, I could, although I'm using one of the devices right now to record that I would do it with, which is my phone. Okay, we're getting to the 4-minute mark. This should be done pretty soon here, if history is any indication. Probably sometime in the next 20 seconds or so. again, I continue to be impressed with how well these perform with such low noise. It really is closer to a Mac than anything I've seen on the Windows side. The designs are nice and all that stuff as well, but that's really the big shock for me. The battery life has been pretty good, but yeah, so again, very similar performance. There's no difference, basically virtually at all, between any of the power modes we've tried so far. So now the question is, what happens if we let it sit for a few more minutes and we run high performance mode with high performance mode here? So best performance and high performance, best performance, high performance. This ratchets the fans up. It'll probably cool it quicker too, but I'll give it till about 4:15 to set and cool down before we run the next benchmark, and we'll see how that does. So hang tight. Oh yeah, and I keep forgetting to talk about thermals because that's really important to me anyway, probably to you. Here, I'm just going to tell you subjectively here how this feels, because again, I don't really have a thermal gun to check this with me, but this is extremely cool. So these palm rests here feel no different from how they always feel. No heat whatsoever. No heat on the touchpad at all. A slight bit of heat up here at the top. As I approach the middle, of course, there's more. It gets pretty warm right here at the moment. Over here, not a lot of heat. No heat. The keyboard, in the middle, slightly subjectively warmer. On the perimeters, really not noticeably warmer at all. I mean, honestly, it's very tolerable heat. On the bottom, a little bit of heat on the sides now, a little bit. Mostly up at the top, near where your knees would rest. Down here at the bottom, where the thighs are, I would say not much of anything. In the middle, certainly warmer. I mean, you can definitely tell there's some heat in the middle, but it's still not anything close to uncomfortable. I mean, it's extremely mild. So this whole thing, I mean, none of this runs as warm as my other Windows laptop does on a daily basis. So extremely impressive. Okay, be back. Okay, and for our final tests, two technically, I guess, because I'm going to do one unplugged and one plugged in. I'll start with unplugged. I'm going to try running, and I'll explain why, the same benchmark, this time with best power efficiency. Okay. But then here, and I just set this so it wasn't, hang on, I'm waiting on this to launch. There we go. It wasn't already set this way. So it was on, as you saw before, high performance. I put it back on optimized a moment ago. The reason I'm not going to do quiet, you might ask, why don't you do quiet? Because you should do quiet with, best power efficiency. Well, I don't want to, because quiet also reduces performance and fan speed. And I really want to operate this in a way that I think most people would operate it under efficiency. I mean, technically this might give you better battery life when paired with best power efficiency. It probably lowers your clock rates even further. Maybe I'll test it later, but I think this is a more realistic scenario where you leave this alone and you set best power efficiency in the Windows power mode. And now let's give it a shot. We'll see how this does. Be back. Just a little mid-test update here. Obviously no fan noise. That's not surprising. Not a lot of heat either. It's pretty clear this is running at lower clock rates. You might ask, why don't you check the clock rates? Well, actually, it takes some CPU and other resources to do that, and I really don't want to mess around with these tests while running, like, say, Task Manager or HW Info or something like that. So I'm just going to let it run, and we're just going to observe as we would a normal observer, as a normal observer would do, and see if we can basically surmise based on what we see, whether or not this is something that would be useful to you to run in real life. I don't know if it would be. Not sure how much better battery life we'd get in this mode. Maybe I'll test that separately at some point. Okay, so another quick update here. We're actually already past the time that it took to run the previous tests. It's now at almost 5 minutes. So if this is any indication, and it probably will be, we should expect to score maybe about 30% lower than we got in balanced or in high performance, or best performance, mode. It doesn't appear that the settings in the Samsung settings app make quite as much of a difference as the basic power modes in Windows in that respect. But we're going to see in a minute here how that factors in as well. So, all right. Actually, the last portion here is going a little bit more quickly. So maybe it'll only be about 20-25% lower. We'll see. Just about finished. It's going to be close to 6 minutes. There we are. We'll see if it's about 25%. This is notably lower here. Actually, they both are much, much lower. So that's interesting. And yeah, I mean, I think best power efficiency mode, it probably feels pretty snappy. I mean, these scores aren't terrible, frankly. I mean, you could find plenty of laptops from previous years that have had these scores that felt snappy enough. But I'm not sure if you benefit enough from that setting. Let's see how the heat feels. Actually, the heat is notably lower. I mean, there is very little warmth in the middle of the computer on the bottom. Even the bottom is the warmer part, typically, I think, here in the middle. This hot spot here where the CPU rests in the middle right here. So you can't really see that. Sorry, I'm terrible at this stuff. On the top here, though, again, there's really almost, I mean, you almost can't tell at all at this point. This is almost indiscernibly warmer than the way it was before. So that's all very good. We'll let this sit for a couple minutes and then we'll try it plugged in. And that will be the final benchmark for today. All right, again, this is hardly warm at all. It feels basically room temperature at this point. And we're now plugged in. And again, just to review one last time, we have this on best power efficiency, and the Samsung settings app is set to optimize still. And we're going to run this one last time while plugged in to see if it makes a difference, whether or not you're plugged in on best power efficiency mode, because it's really not obvious whether it does. And you know, I realized we could probably also pop open, again, like an HW info window or something like that and take a look at clock rates and check that out. And from that, draw some conclusions as to how this thing will perform under different scenarios. But it's also nice to get like real world, actual, usage scenarios here and say, well, that's the way it acted. And here's how it felt in terms of heat. And here's how the fan noise was. And I think that's very useful. I should have reported last time, by the way. I did not hear any fan noise during the duration of the test. We'll see whether or not there's a little bit more loose fan policy when you're plugged in. I'll be back. Because, by the way, this certainly seems to be going more quickly while plugged in, even though the settings are the same. So it looks to me, and again, I'm jumping the gun here perhaps, but I think performance is going to be better when plugged in, specifically only on best power efficiency mode, which is kind of awesome because that means you can run that mode pretty much whenever you want and get probably even longer battery life out of it, and then plug in and it feels basically the same when it's plugged in. We'll see if that's true. If this actually finishes in a little over 4.5 minutes, maybe we can expect that. Okay, the fans just kicked in also about 3 minutes and 47 seconds. It was probably about 3 minutes and 40 seconds when they came on. And it's almost done, so I'll probably just chill here and let this finish. But it looks like it's going to be done very close to when it was completed on all of the other power profiles. So this is kind of exciting, honestly, to me, because it means that I can probably leave this laptop in best power efficiency mode and still get good enough performance while unplugged, probably extremely long battery life, and when plugging in, get, I hope, comparable performance to what I get on the other power plans without too much noise and too much heat. Which, by the way, right now it's a little bit warm in the middle, not much on the sides. Definitely seems like it's running faster than it was unplugged. Look at that. There we are. And we have our answer. This is basically the same performance we received under even mostly best case scenarios with all the other plans. So what this tells me is that you don't really need to screw around with the settings in Samsung Power, in the Samsung settings thing right here. I don't know about quiet. I'm sure quiet makes it quiet. Maybe that's helpful to you in an office environment, but this thing is dead silent anyway. You can't hear it, seriously. It's almost inaudible. So I don't think you ever need to go to this profile. I cannot imagine why you would want to do that unless it buys you substantially longer battery life. But take a look at these scores. This is plugged in with best power efficiency mode. That's awesome. All right, so just one more thing I want to mention wrapping up here, in case you're not familiar with these Geekbench scores. Geekbench is, I believe, baselined on a Dell Precision 3460 running a Core i7 12700 CPU, which is a 12th gen i7, and that's a 2500 score. So that's the baseline that they predicate everything on, based on. And if you get a 5000, it's a linear scoring metric. So in other words, 5,000 would indicate roughly double the performance of whatever got the 2,500 versus whatever got the 5,000. And so what I want to get to here is that final score I got unplugged under best power efficiency mode, which is not this one. This is a comparable score, but it wasn't bad. I just want to point this out. This is a little bit higher than what we got. I think we got 16 or 1500. I think it was 1500 something. And then this is substantially below it. I mean, obviously in day-to-day use, you will notice more single core type stuff. I mean, that's usually what you do when you're like browsing the internet or doing document editing or whatever. But still, I mean, that is not fast and that's not slow, but by today's standards, it's not fast. By, standards 2 years ago, it was pretty good for a laptop. This is, perfectly acceptable as well from 2 years ago. I mean, nobody would have thought that was slow. The score we're getting now with this thing on multi-core performance is pretty remarkable under best power efficiency mode even. So what I'm getting at is I think most people would get by just fine running this thing under that mode if they needed the most battery life possible. Plugging in, not even thinking twice about it, getting the best performance they could possibly get plugged in and pretty reasonably good performance unplugged under best power efficiency mode and just kind of not thinking about it, which is a great thing. So again, I continue to be really impressed with the power efficiency of these things. I do wish that the battery life was better overall, still a bit. I mean, I think it would be nice if we actually got like 13 to 15 hours. I think that's maybe a stretch. It's probably not necessary. Maybe the Yoga gets closer to that because it does have a 70 watt hour battery versus the 55 watt hour in this thing. It gives you a little bit more juice to work with, but I don't know, and I really don't know realistically how much that matters because most people aren't probably going to care. So I just wanted to talk about that before I wrapped up, and I will say I'll see you in the next video. Hopefully in the next couple days or something, I'll be back with some more information, perhaps some impressions on battery life and some whatever other issues I may have had with this thing so I can report to you about that. Have a great day.